about the various damages that something like anger does in the relationship. And then we talked about the actual method of asking for forgiveness using a model that is based on the narratives, the stories from Srimad Bhagavatam. Specifically, the offering genuine appreciation first to the person from whom we're seeking forgiveness. And that genuine appreciation means specific appreciation of something very specific and particular that we appreciate about them. And then we state the wrong that we have committed in, again, very specific terms, that this is what went wrong. And then we express, or we feel genuine remorse for that mistake. And we talked about why it's possible to recognize that we have done a mistake but not feel much remorse for that, because of our ability to offer many different kinds of justifications for our behavior. And then finally we talked about, just briefly, the important step of making some kind of amends or recompense, or some taking a step to fix what has gone wrong as a result of our mistake. We also talked about the willingness to be able to ask forgiveness even when we're not entirely at fault. Right? The importance of not trying to delimit or exactly articulate, well, this was my area of mistake and this was yours, so I'm doing for this or not for that. And even if in the process we have to end up making an unconditional or blanket apology, it's okay. Right? It's okay. We hope that it'll be matched on the other side, but sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And that's okay, because we talked about how in seeking forgiveness, we are always the winner. Right? We're always, in giving credit to someone else and seeking forgiveness ourselves, we never lose in that situation. We always actually come out stronger internally, and we look better externally in both directions. It works very well. So those were some of the things, the key items that we talked about in the previous, yesterday, over the main period of the seminar. And today, I want to discuss the opposite direction, which is to how to give forgiveness, or how to forgive when we feel that someone has wronged us. This is just as important, to be able to graciously offer forgiveness when we feel upset, we feel angry that someone has done something to us. It's not an easy thing to do so, because it's very, very difficult to let go. It's much easier to hold on to our anger or to our feelings or whatever might be happening, even though it's painful, right? Last time we talked about how anger is actually a very difficult emotion to hold on to. It takes a lot of work to be angry. You have to constantly keep yourself in a particular consciousness. You see this with children all the time because they're more transparent, but they get angry at something and then they forget, right? And then they see you and they remember. They're angry all of a sudden. And they have to remember, they have to work to maintain anger, right? So we have to do the same thing, it's just we're more sophisticated at it. So we remember better, people don't realize that actually this person is working pretty hard to keep up their anger towards whatever it is. So we talked about the different problems with anger, right? How it's disproportionate and it's misdirected and all of those things. But giving forgiveness is actually a huge relief. Forgiving is a huge burden off of our own shoulders. For selfish reasons alone, it's worth forgiving. Forget the benefit that it does to the other person in making them peaceful. But just for your own self, it's worth forgiving. And this is particularly important to remember in circumstances where the other party is not interested in asking for forgiveness at all. Right? That when we have to forgive when no one is seeking forgiveness, that is actually a very common scenario in life. that happens frequently. People don't realize that they've offended you or they've hurt you, or they do realize it and they don't mind that they've done so, or it's a lifetime pattern of abuse and anger and all kinds of conflict, and this leaves deep scars on the person who's the recipient of it. And yet, being able to forgive is the most powerful thing that a person can do, even when that person thinks that there is nothing they need to be forgiven for. So even as a one-way thing, it's very beneficial just from a selfish perspective. Because to hold on to whatever that pain is, whatever that anger is, that fear is, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of pain. Let me ask you to try something here. Take the end of your dhoti, or your sari, or your skirt, or whatever, and hold on to it as tight as you can. Okay? Hold on to it as tight as you can. Yeah, now make it a little bit tighter. Now tighter still. Okay, and don't stop. Now this is a lot of work, right? This is a lot of work. Don't stop. Right? Keep it tight. And pretty soon you'll find that your fingers are paining and your arm muscle starts to hurt, right? And it's you can't concentrate on what I'm saying because it's just half your attention is on this thing you're trying to hold on to. And now let go. Such a relief, right? Such a relief. Now you can actually breathe and you can think. And this is the way that anger works from the side of someone who has been wronged. Right? We were talking about anger from the side of someone doing the attacking. But suppose you're on the receiving end of it. Right? This is how it works. We keep our anger and our emotions and our dislike and our pain, and we hold on to it and hold on to it and hold on to it as tight as we possibly can. And then we let go. And it's actually a great relief. It's a great burden off of our shoulders. And so, for selfish reasons alone, forgiveness is a very valuable thing. Not to mention how valuable it is for others, for the person who has committed the mistake they have done. So, all of the things that we talked about yesterday in terms of good practices for seeking forgiveness, best practices for how to seek forgiveness, now we have to let go of all of those things when it comes to being the person who is forgiving. Because while we want to model those practices ourselves, they become the greatest obstacles in forgiving if we start to expect. So the behavior we talked about yesterday in seeking forgiveness, if we start to expect that behavior from people who have wronged us, then we will never be able to forgive. Right? This is the paradox of the situation. We said a specific apology, that lays out exactly what we have done wrong, is so crucial. But if we are on the forgiving end, if it is our job to forgive, and we expect a specific apology that lays out exactly what that person has done, we'll never be able to forgive. Because 9 times out of 10, that never happens. It never happens. We should try to practice that in our own life. But to expect it from the world is we will be waiting forever. Because too often, when people apologize, it's indirectly. Right? It's not a direct apology. I'm so sorry I did exactly these things, and I'm very sorry for what I did. Very rare to find a person who has that level of humility, maturity, and so on and so forth. Most of the time, an apology will be something very indirect, like someone's been isolating us or pushing us away, and they make a gesture to include you again. Right? They pull you back in. You say, okay, they tried. See, they're making an apology. We have to accept that and give them the benefit of the doubt that their intention is such. So this is kind of one disclaimer that we want to start with, is to note the fact that whatever we talked about yesterday, for our own practice of seeking forgiveness, if we start expecting that from those whom we ask for forgiveness, we will never be able to forgive. Right? We'll never be able to forgive. So the basic question is, how can we get ourselves to forgive? How can we get ourselves to let go? The first thing to do is, this comes in actually two parts. The first thing to do is reconsider, frame our understanding of the person who has wronged us. Okay, to recalibrate, to change how we see that person is crucial. And the second is to change how we see ourselves. So let me explain. Okay. When we look at the other person and we see that they have done something terrible to us, okay, then that leads to all kinds of anger. And we talked about how anger becomes disproportionate and it becomes, it expands. That one little mistake or one big mistake they made overshadows everything else that might be good about that person, right? So recalibrating how we see that person. And here are some ways, some suggestions for how that can happen. Okay, one of the most powerful and effective ways of refashioning our perspective of another person is by recognizing the fact that they are probably driven to act in the way that they acted because of their own nature. This is a fundamental teaching in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna reminds us again and again and again in Gita that everyone is forced to act according to the qualities they have acquired from the three modes of nature. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. Only a fool, Krishna is putting this in the first person, only a fool thinks, I am freely acting. I'm acting on my own free will. When in fact we are being forced to act according to the qualities we have acquired. So let's extend this a little bit and say that it is only a fool who thinks that another person is free to act in the way that they're acting. It's just as foolish, right? We think of ourselves as independent actors in this world. Kartaham, I am the doer. Krishna is saying that's vimuda, that's a foolish mentality because we're driven. Well, the next person over is probably driven in the same way, right? Unless they're a jivan mukta, they're a liberated soul. They're probably exactly driven just like we are by our nature. So to think that that person is the doer, they are free to act in whatever way they're doing, is also just as foolish. They too are driven by the modes they have acquired from this material nature, from their bodies, from their minds. When we come into this world, we come with a particular toolkit. This is what karma is it's a toolkit. It's not our fate. It's not our destiny. It's not everything predicted for us in the future. It's not fatalism. It's not predestination. All these misconceptions people have about karma. Karma is essentially a toolkit that we're given in this world. And in that toolkit, we have certain tools. Okay? We might have a chainsaw, and we might have a hammer, and we might have a screwdriver, but we're missing a chisel, and we don't have a drill, we don't have several different things. Okay? Whereas someone else is given a different toolkit in this world, and they come with a different set of skills. Right? Some person might be really good at certain things and maybe an excellent actor, and another person may be terrible at acting, but they might be a great athlete. So we have certain predilections, certain natures and qualities. What we do with that toolkit is our future karma, right? That's how we're shaping our future. But there's limitations to that. You cannot expect someone who doesn't have a particular tool to be effective at doing something in particular. Conversely, if someone has a specific tool that is that's kind of their main tool, then you can rest assured that they're going to probably overuse it. They're born with, a hammer and a chainsaw, right? So things are going to be a little rough. They're going to go around hammering, and it's going to be very useful, but occasionally they're going to hammer someone on the head, and that's going to be not good, right? So depending on our nature, we've got certain things we're good at, but those same certain things that we're good at are probably also our weaknesses, our challenges, our problems. So recognizing that a person is driven to act by their own nature, that they don't really have much of a choice, really helps calm down whatever sense of anger and resentment and so on that we might feel towards them because they have wronged us. We can see this in many different ways in this world. When people act in a particular way towards me, it's very likely that they are acting exactly like that to others around them. Anger, remember, I said yesterday that anger is something that is selfish. It's self-centered. And this is why it's oddly pleasurable to be angry. Because it's self-centered. It's self-focused. And one of the things that we can do to get rid of that anger is to recognize that actually this person is not behaving in this way uniquely towards me. If they did this to me, they're probably doing this to others in their life. Because this is their nature. And that nature is a product of the certain combination of mind and matter that they've been given. And it's highly likely that their parents had a similar nature, and their grandparents had a similar nature, and their great-great-grandparents had a similar nature. These things are passed down from generation to generation. Psychology will tell us this. Right? They're passed down over multi-generations. People behave in ways that are patterned. This is trauma and pain and conflict is transmitted across many generations over time. Right? So how much choice does that person really have when they're faced with the circumstance that they were faced with? Could they have reacted to you any differently? Probably not. Right? Probably not. Maybe with a heroic effort. Maybe with, an amazingly transcendental person. They might be able to transcend it. But even Arjuna, Krishna told him, you are going to fight. You're not going to be able to go sit in the forest and peacefully swallow everything that's happened to you. You're going to take it out. So better you do it in the right way rather than in the wrong way. The conflict that happens is a result of the fact that my nature and your nature are very different. And your history and my history are very different. And the toolkit you have and the toolkit I have are very different. And together we can work well, but also we can be seriously in conflict with each other because we're coming with such different natures and such different approaches. Varnashram tells us this, that every person has a particular kind of nature. And if a Brahmin tries to solve a problem and a Kshatriya tries to solve a problem, they may both solve the problem in very different ways. And they may conflict. They may get in a big problem, a conflict with each other as a result of that. A Brahmin may decide and say, okay, no, I'm going to back off from the situation. Right? The problem with Brahmins is that they end up burying themselves in a hole. They back off and they say, okay, I'm just going to go into my cave and I'm going to do my own thing, my own meditation and overcome this. And the Kshatriya thinks, no, I have to get in there and I have to solve this problem. Right? I have to do something about it. And both skills are crucial in this world. But if you've got two different types of people working on the same problem, then one's likely to step on the other's toes. One is going to be made insecure and afraid and pushed around by the other person. And yet both sides don't have a choice in the matter. Very little choice. If you read Bhagavad Gita carefully, we find that actually free will is very, very limited. Right? Very limited. In the story of Brahma offending Krishna, Srila Prabhupada says in the Krishna book, in this chapter, he says that Lord Brahma's getting confused and stealing the cows and calves and offending Krishna. Prabhupada says, this was to be expected of Brahma. Because he has a nature born in the mode of passion. This is true of Brahma, the creator of this world, the son of Lord Vishnu himself, firstborn creature. His body is made of intelligence, 4 heads, running this universe, and he, Prabhupada is saying, probably would have done this one way or the other. Practically had no choice in the matter. That he has a nature born in the mode of passion, what more can you expect? In the story of the sage Bhrigu, when he, I don't know if you know the story, he goes to Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva to test them, right? As to their nature. And they react in a particular way. And that reaction is precisely according to the nature that they have. Lord Shiva is just, barely controlling himself from getting angry and upset. This is his nature. Right? This is how he does his work, his service in this world for Krishna. And that nature is not necessarily good or bad. That's the important thing to remember. That it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just how it's utilized, how it's deployed. Again, is a hammer good or is it bad? You can't answer that question, right? If someone has the mode of passion in their nature, is it good or bad? Well, it depends. If you use the hammer to put in a nice wood floor with these fine nails, and this can last for decades, for centuries. It's a wonderful thing, a hammer. And you use the same hammer on someone's head, and it's a terrible thing. Right? In the same way, the mode of passion in someone's nature, like Brahma's nature, is it good or bad? Well, it's a wonderful thing, because he could not do his service of creating this universe without the mode of passion. Someone in pure goodness can't do that. They can't get themselves to procreate so much. And yet, that same mode of passion used to mess up Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, not so good. So, just this recognition of the fact that everyone is driven, is forced to act by their nature, it does something very important. Right? It helps us not blame that person for their own behavior. And it relieves us, therefore, of feeling that anger, that resentment towards them. It decenters us from the picture, where we no longer see us as the primary target. It's not all about me. Just like they say, don't take it personally. It's one of the most common phrases you hear, right? Don't take it personally. But how do you do that? Right? How do you not take something personally? It's natural to take things personally, right? Because we are the center of our world. So we take it personally. But by Krishna, in the Gita, he's consistently trying to impress this point on Arjuna, that you're not the center of your world, and everyone is driven by their natures. Everyone on this battlefield is fighting according to what that nature is. Now, remember, again, that this discussion here is from the perspective of the person trying to forgive. If you take this from the side of asking forgiveness, it's a disaster. Right? If our mood is that, well, clearly I'm not responsible. They provoked me. They behaved in that same way. And did they not realize that someone with a passionate nature like me would then reach out and slap them? They should have known that, right? I mean, if Brahma could do it, then I would do it too. I'm not any better, right? So this is why these two parts of the seminar have to be kept carefully separate. You have to see which side you're on at this particular moment and apply those skills to it. Give its the basic principle is, right, that we're we have high standards for ourselves, and we're very, very generous in our standards for others. That's the basic principle of humility, right? That our standards for ourselves, very high, amanina. And our standards for others, very generous, manavina. Then that devotee can function very nicely in this world, very peacefully. So Sanatana Goswami in Vrindavan was like that. So strict in his practice, living under a different tree every night. Tyaktva Turnam Ashesha Mandalapati. He had given up everything, just wearing nothing. And yet, he was so compassionate to everyone. He was like the village guru for the Brajbasis. They had some family conflict and some dispute and some issue with their families, and they'd all come to him and say, how do we resolve this, right? And he could say, well, just take sannyas. Finish this all up. What are you doing all attached to your family? And this? But he didn't, right? He was very generous with others and very strict with himself. This is the mark of a Vaishnava. Right? This is the mark of a Vaishnava. So, in repurposing, in creating a different perspective about the other person, the first thing we can come to recognize is that they are being forced to act according to their own nature. And therefore there's nothing specific about this situation that is about me. Okay? That is about me. And this is why Prahlad Maharaj makes that famous statement in 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is so difficult to practice, right? To actually live. As he says, there are no such things as enemies and friends in this world. Enemies and friends are entirely the creation of our own mind. This is what it means. That person is not trying to act as your enemy or trying to act as your friend. They are dancing to the tune of another master, and that is material nature, Prakriti. We're all dancing to her tune, and so is that person. He's answering to the commands of Prakriti, towards that nature that they have received. And we think, right? We think that it's actually about me, right? They're reacting to me in some way. But Prahlad Maharaj is saying, no, they're not your enemy or your friend. In fact, you're not part of the picture here at all. You have forced yourself into the picture. You've, photobombed this selfie that they've been taking. You stuck your head in it and you say, now I don't look good. But it wasn't about you to begin with, right? It was just about them struggling. Prakriti sthani karshati. Struggling with Prakriti. That's what Krishna says. Everyone in this world is exploiting the modes of nature. And everyone else is there incidentally. It's like they say, right? That if you're worried about what people think of you, just remember how rarely they think of you. We're not part of the picture, right? Usually, 90% of the time we're not. And even when people think we are, it's more about them. It's more about them. How did they look, or how did they behave, or what are they doing? Right? So it's all centered on them. So recognizing that, it will help us put them in proper perspective. The other thing that we can use to refashion our perspective of them is to recognize that when someone gives pain to another person, knowingly or unknowingly, it's always because they are pained themselves. It's always because they are suffering themselves. Suffering is born from suffering. Suffering is not born from happiness. A person of a joyful heart does not go around giving pain to others. It's because there is pain, just like Yudhishthira Maharaj was known as Ajatashatru. Ajatashatru means he whose enemy was never born. And yet he had so many enemies. And so Prabhupada explains that their enemies, his enemies were in their own world. They had all this pain and all this hatred and anger, and they're directing it at Maharaj Yudhishthira and having it bounce back to them and suffering yet more. He wasn't participating in that process. So when we recognize that whatever suffering this person has inflicted upon me or upon another person, they're probably coming from a place of great suffering and discontent themselves. And we should be very, very assured of that fact. So often, our anger increases because we think, see, I'm the victim, and look at them. They've got a good life, don't they? They're still coming to the temple and dancing in kirtan and all joyful, giving classes and leading kirtans and doing their service, and everyone's honoring them and bowing to them. And look at it, no one even cares, right? What's happened to me? They seem to be just fine with their lives. But there's no such thing as just fine in the material world. The most picture-perfect scenario, if we scratch under the surface, is ridden with angst. And sometimes those scenarios that are the most picture-perfect are the ones that are the most painful inside. Because that person is working extra hard to cover what is naturally present. Right? Dukhalaya mashashvatam. Pain is there as part of the nature of this material world. So, the fact that someone is suffering is normal. The fact that you don't see it is abnormal. That means someone has covered it very well. But that takes a second layer of effort to do. Right? The pain is the first layer of suffering. Then trying to cover it up is a second layer of suffering. Because we have to create this image in this world that, see, everything's bhakka, everything's good. My material life is just perfect. See, I've got my beautiful car, and I've got my beautiful house, my kids are doing great, and my hair is perfect, and everything's just right. But all that means is that it's terrible underneath. Right? It's terrible underneath. And they're struggling twice as hard to try to keep it, that picture perfect scenario. So we should never ever for a moment think that someone has gotten away with what they have done. In fact, when someone gives pain to us, our first reaction ought to be a sense of compassion. As in, what must they be going through today to behave in this way to me? On my flight here, things were delayed. The last flight was delayed. And I went to a counter at the airport in Detroit to see if there were alternate flight arrangements or if there was an earlier flight that was leaving, if I could get on that, because my flight was 2 hours delayed. And there was this lady who was standing at the counter, and I approached her for help, and she gave the nastiest possible reply. Like, you check your app. Okay, Delta has an app. So check your app and see if there's any flight arrangements. Why are you coming to me? Well, there's a big sign up there that says, need help? Question mark. This is why people come to us, right? So it was a nasty response, and there was a very easy comeback to that. Right? And that's certainly an option, to come back at her and say, well, here's exactly why I came to you, because this is your job. Right? Look at the sign above your head. But the reality is that for her to respond in that way, while she stands there in a position to help, means that she is suffering in some way, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe she had a horrible day. Maybe she's been on double shifts because she's been covering for someone else. Or maybe there's another passenger who has just heavied her out terribly before I came, and she's still angry about that. Whatever the case is, that reaction is not born out of the badness of her own nature. It's born out of some suffering that she has just been through. Because another thing we know from Bhagavad Gita is that even though people act according to their nature, at the core of their heart, we're spirit souls. And the spirit soul is eternally good. It's eternally Sat, Chit, and Ananda. There's nothing bad about any individual whatsoever. No one deserves to suffer. No one is a horrible person. There's no double conflict in anyone's heart. The spirit soul is pure and untouched by all the gunk that surrounds it. So this is not a terrible person. She's reacting in a very reasonable way given what she has been through. Misbehavior terrible forms of misbehavior are usually very reasonable reactions to horribly unreasonable situations. when we see someone reacting in a totally crazy way, or in a totally unjust way, they're probably making a very reasonable reaction to a very horrible situation that they found themselves in, either in the short term or in the long term in this world. If we were to take a picture of our, Bhagavad Gita describes that we have this physical body and then we have this subtle body. Physical body of earth and water and fire that we can see and we take pictures of all the time. And then we've got this subtle body of mind, intellect, and our ego. So we love taking pictures of this physical body. But if somehow we got the opportunity to take a picture of our subtle body, or of anyone's subtle body, it would look very different. Right? Say someone looks just perfect. Okay, so I look just perfect. Nicely dressed and everything, clothes ironed, tilak is straight, and everything's just right. Okay? But if you took a picture of my subtle body, my mind, my intellect, which carries the impressions of our past lives and the traumas and the miseries, as well as the joys that we've been through over the course of multiple lifetimes and just in this lifetime, what would we see? This form, but we would see a huge festering wound here. At that time when I was hurt by someone. We would see a trauma here and a fear over here. That lifetime when I was, I died an untimely death. Something horrible happened. From that time when a family member really hurt me, I would find a wound for that here. And some wounds would be fresher because they're recent, they're still not closed up. And others would be deep scars. Some would be scratches and some would be puncture wounds, depending on how it was received. And as a result, our subtle bodies would be twisted to accommodate, to deal with that suffering. Just like if someone gets a physical ailment, they get a fracture, their body becomes twisted as a result. Right? So each one of us in this world, our subtle bodies are grotesque. They're grotesque for what we've been through over time. Right? And so recognizing that fact, seeing a person's, not just their physical situation, but recognizing their subtle body and saying, this person has a specific nature, they have been through certain experiences, and however they are reacting now, it's probably because I have poked a wound that was already existing. I maybe didn't even cause, I had nothing to do with it. It might be a wound from their childhood, it might be one from a previous life. It might be a wound they received from a family member, but I poked it somehow. And so I was slapped. And we understand this in the physical body, right? If I come and I pat someone, I slap them on the back as a friendly gesture, and they go, ow! We go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. What just happened? We assume that you weren't wrong to react in that way. You pushed me away. But also, I don't take it personally. I figured there must be something wrong, right? You've got a backache, or what happened? You hurt yourself? We have to think exactly the same way with people's subtle bodies, with their mind and their intellect and their ego. It's exactly the same thing. Somehow we assume that people have full control over their minds. We don't have it ourselves, but we assume they have it, right? That if they spoke like that to me, well, clearly they shouldn't have, and that's probably true. But that's wrong, because they should have full control over their mind, despite everything they've been through in life. I poked them in the wrong place, and yet they should not have reacted like that. But no one has full control in that way. Everyone's subtle body is a product of much, much experience over many, many lives, many, many years in this life. And so when we poke someone, we understand, okay, I have just touched a point of suffering for them. How terrible. If I slap someone on the back and they scream, I don't feel, why did you reject my slap? Why did you reject my hug? I feel compassion. What am I wrong? we have to do the same thing when it comes to people's emotional situations. That you reacted in this way to something I said, you just punched me verbally, you punched me emotionally, I've clearly poked a wound here. I'm so sorry. And that compassion will help mitigate some of our anger towards them. So, recognizing that they're acting according to their own nature, recognizing that what we're receiving is probably a product of their own suffering. The first will help us relieve them of their responsibility. The second will help us relieve them of help us elicit compassion towards them. And then the third way in which we can change our perspective towards them is by recognizing that despite what they have done and who they are very dear to Krishna. This is actually the most difficult to do because when we're angry with someone because they have wronged us, we cannot think of them as dear to anyone because they're not dear to me anymore. Right? So how could they possibly be dear to Krishna? Someone like that, someone with a heart as black as them, someone with that kind of a bad quality, Krishna loves them, Krishna likes them? Not possible. If anything, Krishna should crush them. They deserve the same fate as Hiranyakashipu and all the demons. But we read this morning in Bhagavatam class that Krishna loves them too. He's caring, he's concerned about them too. He's liberating them. He's liberating them. And this can make us very angry. This can make us very upset when we see someone who we think deserves to be crushed for what they have done, who deserves no happiness in this world for what they have done, or at least for some time. They should suffer. And yet, it doesn't seem to be coming to them. We have to, it can be really frustrating. It can fuel our anger. But we talked about this on Friday, right? That we have to recall the fact, we have to remember the fact that they're actually very dear to Krishna. And Krishna accepts their actions, even if it comes with malintent. Krishna will take it. And we discussed the example of Putana, who came with great malintent towards Krishna, and yet Krishna gave her a wonderful position as mother in the spiritual world. So, we don't know, right? We don't know where that person stands in Krishna's eyes. And they may have a much better standing than we recognize ourselves. We recognize. And that's tough to swallow, but it is the truth, generally speaking. It's the truth. So, these three things come to mind in terms of, actually there's another one I forgot. The fourth thing that can help us reduce or change our vision towards them and help us feel a greater sense of compassion towards them, to humanize them, is to recognize that often when a person acts in a particular way, it's because they're under duress. They're under some kind of great challenge or problem in their life. So we discussed this in terms of them coming from a place of suffering, but often there's a specific tension that they are in. And I recall in this regard an article that I read recently by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu in Back to Godhead, which was called Tension in Tension, or Intention in Tension. Intention in Tension. He's the king of cool titles. He really is. And turns a phrase where he takes the same thing and turns it in a different way. Intention in tension. Okay? So when someone's intent is a product of being in tension, under duress, when they're in great stress, some great problem has led to it, then it's important not to take it too seriously. Because it is not who they actually are. And a really fine example of this is the relationship between Lakshman and Sita in the Ramayana. When Sita Devi, when Ram has run off after the deer, and then it turns out to be Marich, and Marich changes his voice and calls out, Lakshman, Sita, help, in Lord Ram's voice, right? Then at that point, Sita Devi becomes desperate and begs Lakshman to go protect Ram. And Lakshman says, I know he's fine. I know him. He's just fine. He doesn't need my help. To the contrary, he asked me to stay right here and look after you. So I want to do that. And then Sita Devi gets really angry and upset. And we know she accuses Lakshman of something really terrible. Which is, she says that you have always wanted to enjoy me. And therefore you have been waiting for this time when your brother would die and you could be alone with me, and now you haven't. What a horrible thing to say, right? I mean, for Lakshman particularly, who left his own comfort for no good reason other than to be helpful. He separated himself from his wife, Urmila, for 14 years to accompany Ram and Sita to help them in the forest. So faithful was he. And Ramayana describes that when he comes, when Sita Devi's flying, not flying, when Ravan is flying, having dragged Sita through the air, then she takes off her ornaments and throws them onto the ground, and the monkeys find them. So Lakshman sees them first. When the monkeys, when Hanuman, Sugriv, and so on, when they come, they say, actually, we think we might know which way she went. How do you know? Well, we have these jewels. Can you identify them? And they bring them before Lakshman first. And Lakshman looks at them and says, most of these I can't recognize. Because I have never looked beyond Sita's feet. And so I don't know what she wears on her arms and on her neck and on her waist and on her chest. I don't know. But this one I can recognize. These are her anklets, her ankle bells. Right? So imagine someone who had that attitude, that approach, right? And he's being accused of the worst possible thing that a brother-in-law could be accused of. So clearly he's horribly, horribly distressed and angered and heartbroken. And he still attempts to do his duty and create the Lakshman Rekha and then runs off to help Lord Ramachandra. When Ram sees him, now he's just killed Marich, he asks Lakshman, what are you doing here? Well, I told you to stay there. And Lakshman says, well, he tells him, this is what happened and this is what she was saying to me, and I just couldn't tolerate the pain. And Ram says, oh no, you shouldn't have bothered about that. You should have stayed there. And she was just really anxious. She was really scared and really worried. In other words, Lord Ram's message to Lakshman is that when things are said in a state of duress, in a state of stress and pain and an unusual circumstance, we should not take that intent seriously. We cannot take it seriously. And this is exactly what Shamik Rishi tells Shringi. When Shringi comes home after having cursed Parikshit Maharaj, he says, you cannot take that seriously. The snake, the dead snake around my neck. The king was hungry and thirsty, and anyone who is heavily pained by thirst will behave in unusually bad ways, right? We call it being hangry. Is when you're angry because you're hungry. Right? So it happens all the time. We don't take with our kids. The kids scream and yell and shout, and what do the parents say? They're hungry. Or they're sleepy. So they know that there's some stress, there's some problem, and therefore they cannot take the child screaming seriously. They cannot take it. With adults, we're no different. in states of duress, we behave in ways that are not very noble. Not very noble. And therefore, the person who is in the role of forgiving can recognize that aspect and say, this person was acting in bad ways because they are going through a lot in life right now. So often we know this about people in our life. We know that X, Y, and Z's family member is really sick and they're suffering and they're close to death and they're running back and forth to India to help them or whatever. And still, we think they should not behave in such a way towards me. Right? Still, we cannot give them the benefit of the doubt. But we have to recognize, there's probably so much in their own life that is under stress, right? That is causing them to behave like this towards me. It's coming out in the wrong place at the wrong time. There's anger, there's frustration, there's fear pent up about something else, and it emerges in my face. So, we cannot take that kind of intention very seriously. This is essentially what Krishna does for us. He recognizes that we live in this material world, and most importantly, that we live in Kali Yuga. So he forgives 90%. He says, what more can I expect? Right? Kalo dosha nidhe raja, yasti eko mahan guna, kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha paramati. I can't expect them to, do the ritual properly and do the yagyas and do all the deity worship properly. No. In fact, I won't even worry about what they're thinking right now, about others or about me. So, because I have to forgive all that intent, because it's Kali Yuga. And this is a horrible, horrible age that is ubadruta, it's always disturbed, always painful. So, we cannot take that seriously. So, these four things I wanted to mention, right, as ways in which we can re-perspective our understanding of another person. We can shift our perspective and see them in a different way. And in this way, calm down our anger and allow ourselves to forgive them for what they have done. Okay? So, shifting our perspective of another. This is the first half. The second half is shifting our perspective of ourselves. When something comes to us that causes us pain, then we recognize that person merely as the instrument and ask ourselves, well, what is it about this situation that is the message for me here? We see this in the case of Parikshit Maharaj again, where when he gets cursed by Shringi, his first response to that is, what am I supposed to learn? What can I gain from this circumstance? What can I benefit? So the first most obvious thing is Krishna is relieving me of my pride. That's the most kind of basic thing. Yes, we talked about this yesterday quite a bit, so I won't go into more detail today. But the idea that Krishna is giving us an opportunity to burn down our pride and to come to a place of humility. Because most types of actions that require forgiveness tends to be in the realm of insults. That's usually what needs forgiveness. Somehow it's much easier to forgive someone's physical wrongdoing. Someone comes to your house and they smash a table lamp. Oh, it's okay. Right? Or they accidentally step on your toe. Or even if they back if you back your car into them. I know of a particular instance like this, where one person, devotee, didn't look in the rearview mirror and backed the car into someone else. Fortunately, noticed just in time, but it was still painful. Right? And somehow it was still, they forgave, right? It was, okay, it's a genuine mistake. So physical mistakes are forgiven easier. It's the emotional mistakes, the insults, all of those things that are much more difficult to forgive. Right? Because those attack our pride. specifically. Someone steps on our toe, our pride is not shaken by that. It's my toe. Toe is not so valuable like my ego is. Someone backs their car into us, even that is okay. It is just my back that's broken. But my pride is broken. That's really tough to swallow. So we can see it like that. Okay, Krishna is crushing this mountain of pride, just like Indra. He did that, so he's doing this for me as well. He's helping me come to that realization. But secondly, and I think in a more positive way, instead of a negative way, we can ask ourselves, what is the opportunity that Krishna is giving me here? What opportunity is Krishna providing? This was Parikshit Maharaj's mood. He says, I've been cursed to die in 7 days. What's the opportunity here? Normal person in this world would say, there's no opportunity. You're going to die in 7 days. The opportunity to die? Is that the opportunity you're looking for? But Parikshit Maharaj saw a golden opportunity available. He said, oh, this is my chance, right, to take early Vanaprastha and head to the bank of the Ganges and hear Krishna Katha for 7 days and 7 nights. And I can finally surrender myself to Krishna. Fortunately, Krishna doesn't give us usually such big opportunities. He gives us smaller ones that we can choose to take advantage of. And there's always an opportunity available in any kind of insult, or in any kind of jab, or in any kind of pain. There's some opportunity that's embedded there for our own advancement in Krishna consciousness. It's always there. Thirdly, we can reconfigure the pain that we feel. We can restructure that pain. When a person in this world experiences some kind of pain, there's different ways in which different people react to that pain. What's the most common reaction that people have when they are hurt or when they are pained in some way? What's the most common reaction, the first reaction that people have?
Ow.
Yes. After the ow, what's the next thing that people do?
They hurt.
How should I get back to that person?
The answer is embedded in what you said.
How could you?
React.
Is who do I blame? Who do I blame for what is happening? It could be something that is totally internal. I stubbed my toe. You've done this before? You open the door and stub your toe, or your nail comes out. And it's like, for me, it's like instantly I'm saying, like, I feel angry. And there's no one to be angry against, because that door isn't alive, and no one pulled it except me, right? And yet, I don't know where the anger comes from. It's like, and you want to find someone to get angry at. And this is natural, human nature. We look for someone to point to as a fault. We get sick, we blame the doctor for not finding our sickness, or preventing it, or giving us the right medicine. What to speak of when someone is actually the instrument that immediately want to blame. So this is the kind of the normal reaction in this world. I am suffering, who's to blame for it? And we scan and we look for someone to blame. Someone needs to be hanged. Just like in the stories of old kings and so on. You can't find the right person? Well, take this guy and hang him. Someone needs to be hanged for it. The blame must be there somewhere. Or they find his brother because they can't find him, so they find his brother. This is actually a real form of justice in the medieval period, right? You find the guy's brother or his son or something and you hang him. Someone pays for it. It's like a parking ticket, right? If you can't pay the parking ticket, well then your brother should pay the parking ticket. Someone has to go to City Hall and pay the parking ticket.
Raghunath Das.
Huh?
Raghunath Das was taken by the Muslim because his father and his uncle had written it.
Yes, exactly. He was taken because the problem was with the father and with the uncle. So this is a universal form of justice. So this is the normal reaction in this world. Find someone to punish for what's happened to me. Someone who's a little more advanced than that. Tries not to blame others. Instead, they blame their own selves, their karma. They say, this is a product of my past karma. Therefore, I am suffering. So it becomes self-blame. I have done something in my past life which has caused me to deserve this. And this is definitely more advanced. You see many people who are not great devotees, but this element is very deeply embedded in them. You can find it in their culture that they come to recognize. They make peace with their sufferings in life by saying, yes, I think at some point in life I must have swindled someone of this money, or I must have cheated to feel that pain now of being cheated, or I must have hurt someone to be receiving this hurt, or this person, I must have been their enemy in their past life, and today they're giving it back to me. So the idea that we then turn the picture and blame ourselves for it. That's better, but it's not the best. It's not the best, because it's still eventually going to be still negative in nature, right? It's trying to solve a negative issue by adding more negativity to it. Something horrible happened, they're horrible. No, they're not horrible, I'm horrible, right? So it's still adding to that same miserable conception, and sometimes we can dig ourselves into this hole of I'm the victim, and I'm powerless, and it's my karma, and I'm just going to sit here and suffer, right? And so on many different levels that can be a problem if taken too far. Remember, we talked about this yesterday, that the logical truth of karma does not determine the moral response that we have to it. Right? This was in response to Anandarupa Mataji's question. That the logical truth of karma does not determine our moral response. If someone deserves to suffer, that's a logical truth, because the world is perfectly just. But the fact that I need to help them, that's a moral response. That if I shrug my shoulders and say, well, they deserve to suffer, that's a moral response that is terrible. Even though it's grounded in a karmic reality that is absolutely true. Just like we talked about the doctor, who knows that this person is in for lung cancer because they've been a lifelong smoker, and they've been told that on every pack of cigarettes they've smoked. And yet if the doctor were to shrug his shoulders and say, well, you deserved it, that's a moral response that is despicable, based on a truth of cause and effect that is completely right. Rather, his moral response should be, no, I have to help you. I have to show compassion. So, when we turn the picture on ourselves and blame our own karma for it, it's a fact. Right? We are suffering because of our karma. And yet, emotionally, morally, that can end up becoming very depressing. And it can end up sapping our desire to improve and to get ourselves out of the situation and to make a positive change in our lives. It can turn into fatalism, which is a negative side effect of karma when it's misused. And this is why many people confuse karma with fatalism. It's because when karma is misused, it turns into fatalism. And we can do that for ourselves. Fatalism is all, it's fate. It's destiny. Whatever God wants will happen. I have no control over the situation. I'm just here as a victim. So, better than that, instead of blaming others, instead of blaming ourselves, what's the best response?
How can I improve? Or what can I learn from this?
Yes.
Whatever happens, it's Krishna's mercy. It's
Yes. It's not the other person's fault. It's not my fault. It's Krishna's fault. But it's not Krishna's fault. It's his mercy. It's his mercy. That is the devotee's response. This is the devotee's response. Notice when Queen Kunti is praying to Krishna in those beautiful prayers in Bhagavatam, and she's remembering all the sufferings that have happened. What is she thinking of? Oh, I must be such a horrible person In all my lives, I have been attacked again and again by these Kauravas, and they made me suffer. Is that how she's praying? No, right? Is she saying, oh, they're such terrible people and they're such horrible types? And no, she's not doing either one of those responses. What is she doing as she remembers the house of lack? And she remembers the disrobing of Draupadi, and she remembers all those terrible incidents.
Krishna, you were there.
Yeah. Krishna was there. Krishna, you were there. You helped us through that, and you helped us through that, and you helped us through that. Krishna, you're so merciful. And therefore she's able to pray, please let me have those sufferings again and again and again. Is because she has discovered a way to make what is negative completely positive. By reconfiguring it as Krishna's mercy. Bhavato darshanam yatsya apunat bhavadarshanam. Because whenever those sufferings come, I get to see you. And when I see you, then I don't have to see those sufferings again of this world. So, for a devotee to take what is coming to them from others and see it not as that person's doing, which we've already seen is not right. They're acting according to their own nature. And not blaming the other person for being mean to them. Not blaming oneself for having ended up in that circumstance. But turning to Krishna and saying, this is Krishna's mercy. That I have received this. What is the opportunity that's present inside? Right? What can I learn from that? What can I gain? How can I benefit from it? And as I mentioned, Parikshit Maharaj is the most amazing example of how he takes that and just reconfigures the whole picture and turns it into something so joyful and amazing. Right? Even though the whole Bhagavatam is born from a rather miserable circumstance. A righteous king who's cursed to die in 7 days. The story should be all downhill from that. And yet it all goes uphill from there. No one ends up feeling sorry for Parikshit Maharaj. At any point in Bhagavatam. You feel good about it. Right? You think, wow, if only I could follow in his footsteps. Right? So that's what a devotee does. Is the devotee ends up never becoming the object of pity for anyone. It's very, when devotees used to see Srila Prabhupada, and because of his old age, he'd be having some sort of physical pain. Prabhupada always used to tell them, he said, don't pity me. Don't pity me. You're going to be like this one day as well. Right? There's no reason to pity. Means he was in Krishna's shelter. He understood. He was like, I'm good. Krishna's mercy is there, whether in living or in dying. He's protecting me. I'm fine. Right? And so the devotee never becomes the object of pity for anyone in this world. Right? Because of this simple fact that they're able to take every suffering they get and transform it into an opportunity. Transform it into a great. And therefore Srila Prabhupada did that famous line, which became the title of Shrutakirti Prabhu's book. What is the difficulty? What is the difficulty? My Guru Maharaj, Hanumat Prashak Swami, likes to quote this phrase from Prabhupada that he heard himself. That if you practice Krishna consciousness, you chant 16 good rounds, enthusiastic rounds of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day, follow the four regulated principles, rise early in the morning, study Srimad Bhagavatam and associate with the devotees, you will have no problems. You will have no problems. And he says, as a way of confirmation, he said, I've been doing this for now 30, 35, 40 years. He said, I have no problems. Now, if you look at his life, well, of course he has problems. Right? There's deadlines to meet, there's stress, there's tension, there's conflicts, there's management issues, there's all kinds of problems. The same problems you and I face, maybe in a little different way, because he's a sannyasi. But the problems of this world are endless. He misses flight connections just like you and I do. He ends up having to spend nights in airports without food. All those problems happen. And yet, he has no problems. Because he has taken the problem and transformed it into Krishna's mercy. It's reconfigured. And therefore the problem is gone. It's not there anymore. So that's why Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur goes so far as to say that the person who insults me is my friend, and the person who praises me is my enemy. Because here's this person who's giving me an opportunity to yet deepen my surrender to Krishna, provide another opportunity to see something as Krishna's mercy, and therefore you are my friend.
So when something happens to us and we're in the thick of the event and the suffering, how do we, beyond the generic, this is Krishna's mercy, how do we recognize what we're supposed to learn and how this is Krishna's mercy?
So the question is, when something like that happens, how do we recognize what we're supposed to learn? How do we recognize what aspect of this, in what way is it Krishna's mercy? So the answer is one that you and I know very well. Right? It's difficult to practice, but it's through taking shelter of three things: Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. It has been my personal experience that when something of great trouble or pain happens, that to me seems apparently caused by someone else. And there's this angst, and there's this suffering, and there's this trouble. Picking up the Srimad Bhagavatam and opening its pages, practically anywhere, right? Sometimes you know where to look, and you can go to that place, right, for solace. But sometimes you don't know where to look, and you think, let me just take shelter of Shastra, and in this case also Guru, because Srila Prabhupada is speaking, he's living through his books. Let me just take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. And the Bhagavatam directly speaks to us. Right? Prabhupada is alive, he's there. The Bhagavatam is Krishna directly in his form of literary incarnation. And the tools to reinterpret our vision are right there. Right? They're in front of us. Now, being able to swallow it is another matter. But in terms of what it is, identifying it, Shastra and Guru helps immensely in that circumstance. Helps immensely. But also the company of sadhus. In our practice of Krishna consciousness, we have to, as devotees, we have to operate on three different levels in our daily life as devotees. The Brajabasis in Vrindavan, all of them are, at the basic level, they are good citizens of Nanda Maharaj's kingdom. They have their jobs and their duties to do. You're a milkman, you have to milk the cows, someone else has to, plant the flowers, someone else has to prepare lunch, everyone has their duties to do. But every devotee then in Vrindavan, besides their general duties that they have to perform, has a certain circle of other devotees with whom they are very close. They are very personally connected. Amongst the gopis, this is their yuta, it's called, their circle of gopis that share the same mood in their service and their relationship with Krishna. So they can share things at an intimate level that they cannot with others. Right? So if you're a manjari serving Radha and Krishna, then you can share with other manjaris. You may not be able to share your mood of service with one of the cowherd boys or with Nanda Maharaj. Right? It's not possible. There's that relationship isn't there. But every circle, every devotee has their circle of devotees with whom they are, they can really share on a heart-to-heart level. And below that, grounding even that, is every devotee's individual, personal relationship with Krishna. That is theirs. It's unique. No one else has access to it. You can share it, but no one knows what it is to experience your relationship with Krishna. It's special, it's unique. And Krishna makes sure that every devotee feels special and unique. Since we're not there in Goloka yet. But in this society of devotees, we've also got three different roles to play. On a basic level, all of us have to be good citizens in Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON movement. This means we have a certain role to play in our temples, in our communities, in the international society, which requires us to have good working relationships with other devotees, a mood of cooperation, that we can work with anyone, whether they be a GVC or a temple president or a little child or the temple cook or the pujari. We need to be able to work with everyone. But it doesn't mean we necessarily see eye to eye in everything. Within that society, we all need to have our circle of sangha, our sadhu sangha, of like-minded devotees with whom we can share our relationship with Krishna. We can share something deeper that provides us the sustenance to work then with everyone. Right? That becomes the basis for it. Because even if I don't see eye to eye with you, it's okay. Because I know I have a group of devotees with whom I do see eye to eye, right? So it's okay. I can respect that diversity within Srila Prabhupada's society. Because I have my place in it. I have my home. But then even that sangha, even those relationships is grounded on every devotee's individual relationship with Srila Prabhupada. We each need to have our own personal, unique relationship with Srila Prabhupada through the study of his books, through the method of hearing from him. That is the foundation to even our sangha. We see this so often, that when that individual relationship is on the rocks, when it becomes shaken or is not secure for whatever reason, we may be going on autopilot in our Krishna consciousness, or we may not be taking things so seriously, or whatever it might be, some loss of faith. But then all the other layers crumble too. We end up having all kinds of conflicts. We can't stand the society and the different levels of management and politics and this and that. We don't like other devotees. We can't find anyone to really talk to. And everything sort of crumbles. That's the basis. Is that by studying Srila Prabhupada's books, particularly Srimad Bhagavatam, we find an individual, personal relationship with Srila Prabhupada. When we trust him, he speaks to us, we speak to him. We understand his mind and his heart. We can access Srila Prabhupada's heart directly through his purports. We know who he is, and what his moods are, and what his desires for us are through his purports. So when that is there, when that sangha is there, then it provides us a very powerful tool for understanding what is Krishna's message for me from this experience. What is Krishna's message? But then the final thing is, and this harkens back to what we were talking about yesterday, is the super soul within the heart, who guides us, tells us what we need to learn. And the most important way that the super soul manifests, even if we can't hear his voice inside, even if we don't know which one of the many voices in our head is his, the one way we can be certain that the super soul will help us is through his power, his quality of time, as the time factor. That more often than not, we understand how to repurpose our perspective, given some time and some distance from what has happened. So that's why forgiveness can sometimes take a period of time. Right? It can come in stages, where initially we may say, yes, I'm forgiving. And yet we can't do it all together. So we need to do it again a little while later. And it takes some time, especially the longer the harm is, the longer the trauma is, the more time it takes to process that and to forgive. Sometimes people come out of a lifelong relationship that requires forgiveness, and to a person who has never asked for forgiveness. And it can take a long time. But usually, time and distance, both, help us to look back at our life and see what was Krishna's mind. What was I supposed to learn from it in this circumstance? It's very rare to find a person like Parikshit Maharaj who in that moment knows exactly what Krishna's message is for him. Usually we bumble around. 7 days, we usually bumble around for 3 of the 7 days. I go, oh, I don't know, what am I supposed to do? This is horrible. Let's go kill the sage. Right? Something working out all our demons inside. Right? But usually by the 4th or 5th day, we go, oh gosh, that's Krishna's message. I just read Bhagavatam and my case is exactly the same as Parikshit Maharaj. What am I doing here? Let's go to the bank of the river and hear Krishna Katha. So for us it may take a little bit of time because they say everyone has 20/20 vision in hindsight. Right? Their rear view mirror is always perfect. So in hindsight, given the space of time, we're able to better see what we have learned. And when we do that, then the next time it comes around, we can apply it a little bit faster. Right? The turnaround time becomes less because we're able to say, I've been through this before. Right? I've experienced this before. And last time, it took me 1.5 years of fighting with this devotee and cold wars and all the tension before I finally came to terms with the fact that I need to let go of what this person has done. This time around, I'm not going to take 1.5 years. We come to that realization in the space of a month. And we're able to overcome it. So we get better at this. Each time we practice, each time we go through it, we get better at taking shelter of Shastra and Sadhu and Krishna and Guru and changing our perspective of the individual. Until we come to a point eventually where things don't stick. They don't stick, they wash away, like the lotus flower, Krishna says, is like the yogi, who stays above what's happening. Or like the extreme cases, Maharaj Rishabdev in Bhagavatam, who people would, make fun of him, insult him, spit at him, kids would come and urinate on him, they thought he was a madman. Nothing to forgive because no offense taken. That was his approach to life. That takes some time to get there. But we can at least quicken the turnaround time that it takes to go through this. Yes, Prabhu.
I have 2 comments and a question. But first, I want to specifically ask your forgiveness for not attending the other 2. My first comment is that one thing about how is this Krishna's mercy, we used to always say that whatever's happening to me, I deserve much worse. And Krishna's mitigating it. So that's already his mercy. Second comment is, isn't it true that there is a downside for not giving forgiveness, as in the story of Rupa Goswami and the sage that was walking by when he was in meditation and thought he had offended him by laughing. And then it turns out that the sage also couldn't get deep into meditation because he had accepted an offense. So there's a danger to not forgiving. My question is this. It would appear from something in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that just giving forgiveness may not be enough because there's in the story of Haridas Thakur and Gopal Chakravarti. At the end of the story, Kaviraj Goswami speaks a very important verse. Is Bhakti Svabhava Jnana Shema Dosha Kare. Krishna Svabhava Bhakti Ninda Saite Na Pare. If I may forgive somebody, but Krishna's going to punish him. So isn't it necessary to go further than just give forgiveness, but to actually, Krishna, please don't punish that person for it?
That's a very deep and very subtle point that takes yet another step of compassion and humility. That not only do we forgive that person for what they have done to us, but we actually pray to Krishna that no harm come to them. And we see this in rare cases like Haridas Thakur. We see it in cases like Jesus Christ, hanging on the cross and saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And so he's not only, clearly he's forgiven them, but he's also asking God, he's asking Krishna to forgive them, because he knows that for their behavior they're likely to be punished. So that's real life Vasudeva Datta quality compassion, where the maggots are falling from your body and you're putting them back in the wombs, right? That is tough, right? To desire not only to let go of what they have done to us, but to actually pray for their benefit, for their good. For their good. So, I think that's a very crucial point. One way in which we can help ourselves get there, particularly in the case of devotees. You know, there's this verse in Nectar of Instruction, I forget the verse number now, but it says, Drishtai cha janitair bahushash cha doshai, the first line, that a person, we should never see faults, shortcomings in a devotee's body. They may be, it says, their complexion might be terrible, or they may have certain, a kind of disease, you know, like Sanatana Goswami had, a skin disease, right? Or they may be born in a particularly not very elevated family, or they may be of a low caste, or some deformity might be there, right? We should never look at the body of a devotee and judge them. Rather, such imperfections are described as the foam that shows up in the waves of the Ganga. That can be a little bit, dirty sometimes. In the days where there's less pollution, so the foam was the main problem. Today there's all kinds of other things in the Ganga. But just like that, still a person bathes in the Ganga, right? And we take a dip. So in the same way, we still take the association of that devotee. We bathe in their association, even if there's all these shortcomings in their body. But once again, we can remind us here that body is not just physical body, but also we have a subtle body. And sometimes in a devotee's subtle body, there may be some defect. A particular devotee may be a little extra prone towards anger. Or a devotee might be a little bit touchy in the mornings. Or a devotee might have, I don't know, so many things, right? Especially if that devotee is a member of our family, our husband or wife. We have a whole list of different shortcomings we know about that person, weaknesses and so on. But even there, we come to recognize that just because this devotee has this psychological flaw does not make them any less pure, any less worthy of our respect and our association. That psychological flaws are still only physical flaws. The subtle body is still a physical body. It's not spiritual, it's not transcendental. It's still a physical body that will be left behind when we go to the spiritual world. It will stay right here. So therefore, the mental, emotional defects that we see in other devotees, we ought to ignore them, just as we would ignore a physical defect in their body. And by seeing that, by recognizing that, we can genuinely pray for their welfare. We can hope that nothing terrible happens to them, because we recognize that this is still a devotee. They're still worthy of my respect and my honor. Yes, Prabhu.
Now, giving forgiveness, let's take a scenario of before Mahabharata and after Mahabharata happened. Like Draupadi, like Dusashan, right? He pulled her with her hair and took her to the assembly of Kauravas. And she vowed that she will not tie up her hair unless she washes it with the blood of Dusashan, right? And a scenario after Mahabharata, when Ashwatthama killed his 5 sons, she immediately forgave him, saying that he's the son of her guru. Now, in that situation, like one place, like being a Vaishnava, she forgave Ashwatthama, but eventually Krishna didn't want to forgive him, and he was asked Arjun to remove his jewel, and there the forgiveness was not given. Okay, now up to what level, one should be forgive for like all these things, like how in Kali Yuga, like so many things happen, people get cheated and some people forgive and some don't. Like
So-
how would one...
Yeah, so you raise a very important point, which is that sometimes we are in a position to not forgive a wrongdoing, but to stop a wrongdoing. Right? So we've been discussing it in terms of something that has already happened. But sometimes we are in a position to correct, to stop something in its tracks, or to correct someone from doing a further wrong. Particularly, people who are in that position include mothers and fathers, include teachers to students, include the spiritual master to disciple, include people in positions of authority like judges, government officials, like managers who have responsibility for employees or for volunteers, anyone in an administrative or management position. All of these roles require us to intervene. Even if we forgive mistakes done to us, they require us to intervene in cases where mistakes have happened to others or will happen, right, to prevent further harm. And this was Arjuna's case also. Krishna asked him specifically, you have to fight and you have to deal with this circumstance. So, two things to remember from this point. Number one, we have no right to forgive someone for the harm they have committed to another person. How can we possibly do that, right? In fact, we probably are requiring of a different response, which is if we are in a situation where we can do something to help stop that harm to another person. And this is called paradukha dukhi. We take another suffering and we try to do something about that, right? So we have no right to forgive the pain someone gives to someone else. All of this is meant for ourselves, right? This is for individual application. But for another, we may have to step in, we may have to intervene. Secondly, even in our own situation, or even in a management situation, for example, we may decide that someone needs to be punished for what they have done. They need to be dealt with, they need to be chastised, or whatever it might be. And doing so is not wrong when done in the right way, in the right position, and all of that. But at the same time, when we do intervene, we should reasonably expect that we will be caught up in the reaction somehow. So, when a king punishes someone who has done something wrong, when a teacher tells off a child, or a parent disciplines a child, we are doing our duty, but we're also putting something out into the world that possibly a mistake could be made and will come back at us at some point, right? We can, just like with Draupadi, she became angry and she decided that something had to be done. And that was not wrong, because she did deserve justice, right? It was horrible what happened to her. And yet there were also consequences to getting that justice, namely the whole war, right? So this is why karma in this world is such a lose-lose situation. Because one way or the other, you touch it, you become entangled. There's something unintended that always happens, despite your attempt to make everything just right. And therefore, we find throughout Srimad Bhagavatam that anyone in such positions where intervention is required and forgiveness is not sufficient, anyone in that position ultimately gives it up. They say, I've done my job, it's time to move on. It's time to retire. Every king leaves home for the forest. Every parent says, okay, now you're on your own. Right? My job is done. Every guru lets the disciple move on, make their own advancement, have their own disciples, right? Means everyone at some point, from those positions of authority, responsibility, of shasana, of rule, of protection, ultimately has to walk the path of renunciation. Is to say, I can only do this service for so long. And then I have to take up a service that does not require me to walk this fine, fine line between delivering justice and making offense. It's such a delicate thing. The king has to punish a criminal, and yet one non-criminal accidentally punished is horrible bad karma. One person hanged who didn't deserve to be hanged, horrible karma, right? So it's like a razor's edge, and you're gonna get something wrong. There's no doubt about it. We're humans. Just like King Riga, that story in 10th book, right? He's giving all this charity to the Brahmins. Such a pious act. And despite doing everything perfectly, one of the cows wanders from the herd of one Brahmin to the next. And he gives the same to his own herd. And he gives the same cow back in charity to a different Brahmin. Now what could he have done? And yet, he still had to suffer the karma for that. So, that's why at some point, we have to do our service. Just like Arjuna, Krishna said, you've got to do it, no running away. But at some point, Arjuna himself said, okay, enough. Parikshit, you're king, off we go to the Himalayas. Right? All of us have to walk the path of renunciation in some way. We may not walk to the Himalayas, but we have to take on that mood at some point in our life, after the service Krishna is requiring of us is complete. And Krishna will give us indication. As time goes on, as age, our service changes over time and as we age. And it doesn't stop, it just changes. And the most important change that happens is that we stop doing services that place us in the mode of passion. Because all of these services require passion, creation, and rule, and teaching, all of these things require taking loads and loads of karma. At some point, every spiritual master stops taking disciples. Just, Prabhupada says so much in the Nectar of Devotion. He says at some point, the Guru should think, I have enough disciples, not anymore. Because how much can you take, right? How much can you give in that way? At some point, we have to say, no. Now is just the path back to Godhead. It's the path of renunciation.
So, during that time, even Krishna was there to guide the Pandavas, where to forgive and where not to forgive. But in our situation, wouldn't it be right to, whatever thing happened to us, bad or good, from others, or maybe due to our past karma, wouldn't it be good thing to forgive everything, or to react to that, or take action, or maybe go to the higher authority? It's still going to create a karma, right?
It's wonderful to forgive, but sometimes we need to take action. Sometimes we need to do something about it. And in that case, the best way to take action is to go to someone who is their superior. Then the reaction is least. Too often what we do when we need to take action is we go not to their superior but to our friends.
Yes.
And we go and the whole community knows the problem, and then forgiveness becomes nearly impossible. And for them to ask forgiveness becomes impossible because they've been humiliated. Right? So this was actually one important point I wanted to make, which was when someone comes to us asking for forgiveness, in the rare circumstance that someone actually seeks forgiveness of us, our number one role in the role of forgiver, our number one thing to remember is not to crush the person asking for forgiveness. It's human tendency to do that, to demand more. Now tell me exactly what was the problem, and tell me why exactly did you do it, and let's apologizing to me is not enough. Let's have a meeting, a group meeting, and why don't you apologize in front of the whole devotee community? Right? We want more, and we want more, and we want more, and we want more. Our job is to make it easier for that person to forgive. And the number one way we can do that is by keeping it in confidence. When Indra came to apologize to Krishna, where did they meet? Bhagavatam specifically says that Krishna waited. He knew Indra was coming. He waited in a secluded spot at the base of Govardhan Hill, away from the village, away from the Brajvasis. And Prabhupada explains why. He says because, actually his disciples who are writing the purport, Vishwanath Chakravarti, drawing from Srila Swami, they explain that it's because Krishna did not want to humiliate Indra further. He was already taking a huge step. He's the king of heaven after all. He's coming with his head hung low. Make it easier for him, not difficult. And if he were to do that in front of the whole assembly of Brajavasis, it would have been very tough. Possibly so tough it would have broken his back. So when someone is down, we don't want to break their back so they can't get up again. So they have no face left as a result. Right? I'm going to ensure that you never get up from that posture. Right? That you can't show your face to anyone. No. At the very least, we want to make it easier for them. And so, also in the case of Parikshit Maharaj and Shringi, the one thing in reading that story I kept wondering was, why did Parikshit Maharaj never apologize to Shami Rishi? He had also done a mistake by putting us. And Prabhupada answers that in a purport. He says, when Shami Rishi sent that deeply apologetic message, either a letter or in person through a messenger, we don't know. But when he sent that message, telling the king that he was to die in 7 days, he expressed such deep remorse for what he had done, what his son had done in cursing the king, that Parikshit felt that if he went back to face the sage, he would humiliate him yet further. Right? That just by going and saying, I'm so sorry, he would just totally humiliate him even more. Because already he was devastated. And he would be like, what are you saying sorry about? I just killed you, literally. My son killed you. And you're saying sorry? It would be too heart-wrenching. And so to let Shami Rishi save face, Parikshit Maharaj avoided him and went straight to the bank of the Ganga. So that's a generous forgiver. Right? That's generosity. Krishna, Parikshit Maharaj. This person is already down, already humiliated. Let's make it easier for them to stand up again, to get up again. So I think we're coming to the end of our time here. Right? 15? Okay. So should we stop? Okay. So there's 1, 2, 3 hands. Okay. So I'm going to give 30-second answers to each of the 3 questions. Okay. 30 seconds. Yes.
It's just a comment about Yashodhara Prabhu's question that when you're in the thick of things, how to do it, and I just want to echo your answer that in the first canto, in the 17th chapter, 18th verse, when the bull is being beaten, and the whip is still coming down, and the bull says, the Parishit asked the bull, why are you suffering? And the bull says, it is very difficult to ascertain the actual miscreant. Yes. Even though the whip is still coming down, the guy is hitting.
Yes.
And at that time, the bull says, it's very difficult
to ascertain who's at fault.
Who is actually hitting me?
Yes.
Even though it's actually happening. So you're in the thick of it. But that sense of, or just the cultivation of detachment, or even being more philosophical, and that practice makes us stronger. That when we're in the thick of it, we can actually step away from ourselves and try to look at it analytically. And that can help quite a bit in that painful moment.
Such a great example. And my 30-second response is that, the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam has so much this question of who is to blame. Bhishma Dev raises it, Dharma raises it as the bull, Parikshit Maharaj raises it again and again. And the reason for that is because Bhagavatam begins where Mahabharata leaves off. And Mahabharata is a story of trauma. And Bhagavatam is a story of healing. Bhagavatam begins by saying, we have to move on. We have to forgive. Right? Let's clear our heart so we can actually focus on Krishna Katha. So it's the healing, it's the resolution of the bringing, the making whole again of all those relationships we find completely torn and broken by the end of Mahabharata. And there's no resolution, but Bhagavatam provides it. And that's why first canto, it begins with all of these questions. Who do we blame? Who do we blame? We can't blame anyone for this. Okay, and then, yes. Yes.
It's quite a bit long question, but I'll try to make it short.
In the lecture, we mostly kind of, it's at least how I understood, we spoke about one-time accident or twice or thrice, and respond to it. It's so wonderful. But what is in the situation when you in the close relationships? It's like quickly, like if a stranger offend you, even if you didn't flirt or didn't be in first route to provoke, it's easy to forget and bring this kind of, attitude that, okay, maybe didn't have a good day or whatever else, or nature or this. I didn't inflict anything, she behaved towards me like that, and I can forgive and move on. It's very easy. But most of the pain comes from the relationship who are close to. Your family members, your friends, husband-wife situations, like this. And sometimes it's too often to be in a very happy state, because that nature or the person keep repeating a certain misery inflicted on you over and over and over and over again. What shape the other person, the mood, the consciousness, or like well-being. So how you can forget in that situation, how you can be forgiving and having a wholesome life, save the family, be a nice child or nice wife or husband or a friend, when someone due to the nature keep repeating and giving you this misery, how to behave.
Yeah. So what to do in the case of a family when it happens again and again and again.
Yeah.
So again, this is a deep question that requires a longer answer, but I'll just give it very short, and then we can discuss further maybe later. But the Madhyamadikari is someone who is able to make friends with the devotees and avoid the envious and worship Krishna. So we have to recognize that there's no demons out there, and there's no pure devotees mostly. So within the heart of a single person, the demon is there, and the devotee is there. And our practice as Madhyamadikaris, as people in the middle range of devotional practice, is to figure out how can I make true relationship with the devotee I know this person is, and how can I avoid the demon that is present within their heart, right? So that principle applies within a single individual. And so often in close relationships, once we know that this aspect of their nature is demonic, demonic means it's causing pain to another person, right? It's made to cause pain to others. Once we recognize that, then we find a way to avoid that, right? To duck. Every time those arrows come at us, we duck, we avoid. We cut it off, we push it away, while at the same time recognizing that there's a devotee in there who deserves my love and my friendship and my compassion, right? So the Madhyamadikari is the one who knows how to duck very effectively. And in every relationship, there's a way to duck those onslaughts. Sometimes we need to tell a person, I'm sorry, we're not going to go there anymore. Right? No. We've talked about this before, we're not going to go there. Sometimes it can mean putting it in one ear and putting it out the other ear. I know it's their nature. This is the 15th time it's happened. So ducking, there's different ways to duck. But the one thing the Madhyamadikari doesn't do is try to kill the demons. The Madhyamadikari, the only person who kills demons in Vrindavan is Krishna and Balaram. Only them. So the Madhyamadikari does not take that role for themselves. Make friends with the devotees and duck the demons. And if we have someone in our life who is both a demon and a devotee, which is most people, then we make friends with their devotional qualities and genuinely appreciate that and duck the demonic qualities.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was more than 30 seconds. I feel worried now that we're going over time. So I beg your forgiveness for not getting to your question. Maybe we can talk right after, but I think this is a good place to stop. And I want to thank you all again from the bottom of my heart for participating in this seminar, for so many wonderful questions and realizations and comments. You added immeasurable depth to whatever points I had prepared here. And I learned a lot from hearing your realizations and specific cases for how to practice this very, very difficult and very deep topic. So I'm very grateful for your participation and for attending these past 3 days, and hopefully we'll see some of you this evening, if not in the future. So, thank you very much.